So, kia ora kia tātou katoa toa and whakalowhalahi atu, and warm greetings, and tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings in the languages of the Pacific ancestors from my mum, who's from Cook Island Māori, my dad, who's from England, from those of Ngāti Toa, on whose lands we're currently standing. I think it's Ngāti Toa, I might be wrong on that. I think I am. And also from Ngāti Whātua, which is where I've lived for the last 2 decades. My name's Yvonne Te Rokirangi o Tangaroa, and I'm really delighted to be here, and I want to give a big thanks to those who nominated me, who provided references, and who considered me worthy of being a member of Te Aparangi. Delighted that my daughter's able to be here with me, and also a little worried because I'm following 2 fabulous speakers who were able to communicate everything without their slides. I shall give it a go as well. My parents would be very bursting with pride and asking, how did that happen? And what does it all mean? So I'm going to just try and give you a little bit. The title of my presentation is Cultivating Pacific Feminist Development Geographies. So I just want to take you through that a little bit. The first one is, what do I mean by geographies? And I talk a little bit about what we say geographies in out-of-the-way places. And I came to that at one of the very first international population studies conferences I attended as a PhD student. And I was listening to a leading demographer who was explaining the complexity of population projections at the regional level because of the difficulty of accounting for internal migration. He also talked about the difficulty of accounting for maternal mortality. And I was intrigued, and I asked a simple question. Where do Pacific regional dynamics feature in his analysis? And his response was, the Pacific? It's not even on the map. So you can imagine that effect had on me. It really heightened my interest and resolve to think a little bit more about how migration and fertility are known, especially in places that are off the map. And this converged at the time with the concept of out-of-the-way places. Who are they out of the way for and to? And that's thanks to some great anthropologists as well. In my doctoral study, and my supervisor is here in the room, Robin Longhurst, delighted to be following in her footsteps, and Dick Bedford, who was also has also done a lot of work for the Te Aparangi. So my doctoral study was really looking and rethinking about maternities. Here we go. No. About maternities in population geographies. There it is. It's Pacific. It's not even on the map. So that was when I began thinking about maternities and population geography by thinking about feminist theories of embodiment, and that opened up a whole range of thinking about demography and away from that narrow manner, where I was interested in fertility patterns in different places and different times, and how they were known. So my analysis of maternities was really an effort to kind of have a look at the in-depth research and evidence to show how, when we ask those critical intellectual questions of foundational concepts in population geography, we unearth very different kind of ways of knowing things. And in particular in this field was in the area of population dynamics. So I will try this. Here's this map, this wonderful map. So we come back to the Pacific and to the geographies that people consider to be out of the way. So Porirua, I was born in the Cook Islands, but Porirua, not far from here, is really the home that I was in from 2 to my early 20s. And it's a place that many people from the Pacific came, and from Aotearoa, rural Aotearoa, where they moved in the 1960s. So I was intrigued about what that movement was all about. We know it was about the employment in Todd Motors and Porirua Hospital and New Zealand Government. So I'll let you see if you can find Porirua on this map. Mauke is another island, very meaningful visit that I made when I was just 10-year-olds with my family and lived for a couple of months there. But we didn't go back as return migrants, but we went part as a process of coming and going to places that we call home. Manihiki, if you can find that on the map, was a place where I did my master's research, and was a notable field site as well, because the mobility I was able to look at there was household mobility. So individuals moving, it's a whole notion of households. And then Wanigala, which is in Papua New Guinea, and it's a much-loved home of my in-laws, and it was site of my fieldwork for my PhD, where the fertility of mobility was punctuated by extremely high estimated rates of maternal mortality, and I wanted to know what did that mean in that context, given, as we've heard before, about under-resourced area. What are we counting? What are we knowing? So there were many other domestic moves since then, and each of those contributed to my understanding of population dynamics in Samoa and Brussels and Canberra before coming back to Aotearoa and Tamaki. So let me go through some of these concepts that I know my dad would be asking, what do you mean by that? Feminist. For feminist, you're there, I'm not. With my moves across many of these places became a growing understanding of the stark experiences of gender inequalities. In the towns and the villages of both the global south and the global north, access to healthcare, access to education, employment and political life was a struggle for many women and girls in all their diversities. And my discomfort with this was sometimes somewhat eased when I joined a feminist global network of scholar activists from the global south. This group, called Dawn, Development Alternatives with Women in a New Area, worked in the global south, and it kind of helped me to reframe my analysis through the interconnection of themes of globalisation, of sexual and reproductive health and rights, political restructuring and political ecologies. So what came out for me was needing to look very closely at the gendered nature of all social relations. And from that, I kind of moved a little bit from having a feminist supervision experience to being an independent scholar in Samoa and through the Dawn Network to start to pivot a little bit more into the development space, into the academy and to various places in between. And over that time, with the number of master's graduates, I was very fortunate to have over 50 master's graduates who came from the Pacific, South America, Asia and Africa, and they taught me a lot. They taught me a lot about knowledge making, and they taught me about knowledge making in terms of maternities and the research that I was able to do in Papua New Guinea on what we call Medicine Mary on the Sepik River, the way in which we were able to advocate for Pacific research on gender and all of its complexities. They taught me about knowledge making in terms of mobilities, in terms of labour mobilities, and more recently climate mobilities, of freedom and of unfreedom. And they taught me about knowledge making around marketing, about fresh food, coastal foods and roadside foods and gendered livelihoods and climate change. So being a feminist in those kind of spaces opened me up to, I learned a lot in those spaces from my students. Development. We all know a little bit about development, and I know I've got a family member who keeps asking me, what is development? So again, if we come back and have a look at that word, we don't want to pause too much there, but really from the research and advocacy space, I then kind of moved right into the belly of into the development industry, and I worked as a development expert in the Africa, Caribbean, Pacific group of states in Brussels. And it was a fascinating, but fortunately a very short exposure to the endurance of coloniality, and allowed me to sort of deepen my commitment to this decolonial approach to development, to be able to de-link, to be able to reframe, and to be vigilant all the time for the slippage. So these kinds of embodied pivots, I call, really allowed me to understand better and better how power operates in development. And the academy became a site where I was able to build that knowledge. Geography. Geography remains a kind of transdisciplinary space, and it allowed me to think about things like the geography closest in the body. It allowed me to think about the fertility of mobility and how it's co-constituted by other things that happen in our daily life. It allowed me to think about the concept of diverse economies and how there are many ways in which we practice our economies. Am I moving? I'm not. Geography. Cultivating is that process that I think we all hope that we can do. That process of identifying and recognising and then unsettling. The enduring entanglements that are always there, and then continually refreshing and reconstructing and always keeping watch. Lastly, once we do that, we still need to hold on to a little bit of audacity. And that audacious responsibility is the thing that has also driven me with my work, and the three key areas that I also work outside of the Academy. Toksave is a Pacific gender research portal to make Pacific research more discoverable. Contributing to the establishment of Oxfam in the Pacific, not for the Pacific, but in the region, for doing development differently, and contributing to the establishment of the Pacific Feminist Fund, which is about funding feminist work differently. So I hope this gives you a better understanding of my research, my practice, ngā mihi, kia manuia, and I'm very happy to join this cohort of fellows. Kia ora.